They'd have to start paying attention to the working class and not just saying that they're paying attention to the working class, because if you look at how Kamala did her rallies, it's billionaires and the elites performing at these rallies. And she's not going on to normal people podcasts. She's going on to elitist podcasts. And basically in Clinton's years, I think that's when the relationship between the Democratic Party and Hollywood started getting really close. And I think Obama did that even more. I mean, he's a producer or director now, and we're obsessed with celebrity in the US. And I think it's no different for politicians. And when they get in those circles, I think they feel really cool. When you're hanging out with Jay-Z, Beyonce, when you're talking to these people and befriending these people, you feel cool. And I think the problem is our politicians need to be in touch with the common man, not just, rich people.
We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
Welcome back to Elevated Thoughts. Today we have a fun episode with our friend and host of the Thoughtfully Mindless podcast, Artie Martello. Both Mike and I recently had the opportunity to be guests on Artie's podcast, Thoughtfully Mindless, and separately. And actually, it was pretty cool. Mike and I touched base to finally get to be the guests for once, sit on the other side of the desk. So now, of course, Artie, we're returning that pleasure to you, our honored guest today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me. I have a lot of respect for you guys' show, and it was really cool to interview both of you. You're the first duo I've ever interviewed of two people who run a podcast together, interviewing both of them. So really cool.
Very cool, man. Well, I was blown away. I remember when you asked me to come on, I was kind of saying, oh my gosh, I noticed you do 2+ hour shows, and I don't know if I'm that interesting, but it doesn't fall on deaf ears. I appreciate your words, and I appreciate you having us on because it was fun. And, that's kind of one of the things that we talked about on our episode, and when I listened to Mike's, it was the way to have productive discourse, which is the reason we started this show, right? And that's what we've proved over, I think you're now episode 43 with us, Artie, that we can remain friends and we can talk about tough issues, but we can still tackle them and try to understand them more fully without getting down each other's throats. So when we talk about Thoughtfully Mindless podcast, what made you start something like that? Was it similar? Was it intriguing? Or tell us a little bit about it first, maybe.
Yeah, I honestly just saw a very divided world and country. So I was thinking about it for a long time. I actually started it in 2020, ran for 10 episodes, and then kind of closed up shop because just things got in the way, Mm-hmm. I ran into some BS over the years whenever COVID happened, 2020, at the end of 2020, I got fired from Cox Automotive for refusing to take the vaccine. Oh. And I watched all my coworkers, especially coworkers who were single mothers, kind of get forced into that position that they had to take the vaccine and stuff like that. And I looked around after that and I was like, man, there's a lot of people that aren't willing to speak their mind and go against the authority, like if you're dangling their job in front of them and stuff like that. And I was like, maybe I should use the fact that I am willing to stand up and just speak my mind and just do that. And it's been a process. I'm not always comfortable with it. I don't love pissing people off, and I try not to, but I do want to speak my mind, and I want to have useful conversations because I figure I don't know everything. And I know you guys are the same way. Like, you're humble in your knowledge, so it's like, if you don't know everything, then why not talk to people who might be able to enlighten you a little bit? And if maybe their ideas aren't right, but maybe they have strong arguments against what you believe and what you hold dear, and you can, sharpen your arguments and use those conversations to strengthen your points and just understand the world better.
One of the things we talked about a lot was how Mike and I have both kind of softened our political leanings since we started it, right? And I didn't know actually that you'd lost your job and as a kind of a catalyst all around the same time with the starting of the podcast. May I use a word, radicalization? Is that part of maybe what happened? Because I know maybe you could talk a little bit about we're a political show, a little bit about your political background, right?
Yeah.
Because you must be some hardcore right winger if you're refusing the vaccine.
Yeah. No, I was at the Capitol January 6th, rioting and breaking in and stuff like that. No, I am politically homeless, I guess, more or less. I have gone all over the map. At times in my life, I've been a little bit more conservative. At times, I've been more liberal. And more often than not, it's quite more liberal. My personality is very liberal. I'm a creative person. If you listen to like Jordan Peterson and all, people high in openness tend to be liberal. And I'm very high in openness. And I like that. And it helps me navigate the world like well. I just enjoy exploring things. And the view of conservatives is they can be a little rigid with their ideas and not want to change. And I'm like, I'm all for change if it's positive change. So yeah, I've gone all over the map. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter in 2016. I voted for Jill Stein because after I was watching things happen, and when I saw Bernie Sanders get screwed over by the Democratic Party, specifically Hillary Clinton, I just couldn't back that up. I couldn't just swallow that and be like, oh, yeah, I'm going to vote for her, even though she stabbed the person in the back who I actually thought would be good for the country. And my opinion on Bernie has changed over the years, too, but I didn't vote for uh, Trump or Hillary Clinton in 2016. I started opening up my eyes a little bit, being a little bit more receptive. I did vote for Trump in 2020. I was like, kind of not into it, but I just felt like his first term got hampered a lot with a lot of stuff that wasn't legitimate. So I wanted to give him another chance, and then I voted for him again in 2024. Just pragmatically, I liked the coalition that he had around him, and still don't consider myself right wing. Still have very some liberal views. If I take the political compass test, I am center left and libertarian. I'm center left libertarian. I'm very anti-authoritarian, but yeah, pretty much in the middle with things.
So I'm sure you have some personal experiences. There's the challenges of, right, of if you believe in this one thing, all of a sudden you get put into this bucket or a silo. So you must believe all these other things,
Yeah.
and they, prejudge you right away. What are some personal issues you run with? Because, our circle of friends is the same way. If you believe this one way on one issue, you must think way, all
Yeah.
the way, on all everything else.
And I also just want to add to that. Not only that is I deal with a lot on the right, at least, of preconceived notions. Someone, oh, you must think that, or you must feel
Yeah.
that way,
Yeah.
and it's unacceptable. It's not true almost ever.
Yeah, I have very liberal acquaintances, and I would game with some of them, and some of them, yeah, some of them are very, very anti-Trump, and I'm not going to defend everything Trump says or does because he does and says a lot of things I disagree with. But if I offer any kind of argument against any position that's anti-Trump, I'm a Trumper, and it's like this is ridiculous. Like you have to be able to have a nuanced conversation without it being, oh, you're this or that. Like, can't we just be people having a discussion with like diverse views and we want to explore all those views without just I have to label you and put you in a box. And that's what labeling is. When you label somebody, you're labeling them so that you don't have to consider their position anymore. You want to just put them in a box and say, I already know everything I know. They're a liberal. I know everything I need to know. They're a conservative. Like that's what labels are for.
It's very interesting, and I guess it comes down to who you're around, right? So it
Yeah.
sounds like you have a lot of liberal friends. I think I probably in real life have more conservative friends, but I think everybody's more pragmatic. Probably people are
Yeah.
allowed to have these conversations, and my cousin Richard is the person who told me this phrase because I don't watch Destiny or do much gaming, but apparently he feuds with that guy Hassan Anabi, and I'm messing up the names as well, but they coined the term a debate pervert, which is what they called Destiny, because he can go on any side of an issue and say, I'll debate that side. And in this
Yeah.
kind of political sphere, that's what I almost feel like. We can go on and talk about these issues, and why can't we philosophize and explore these kind of intricacies and nuances without being labeled? Like I could
Yeah.
probably argue. We interviewed a Brianna Wu, who's a trans woman, and right, she was asking my perspective, and I look back, I go, I didn't really give the right wing perspective at all. I gave my
Yeah.
perspective. So am I right wing? I don't know. And to help me understand this, actually, because I know you've been talking with a lot of candidates, and you mentioned Jill Stein. Congratulations. That must have been a really cool conversation.
It was
But
cool.
you said the libertarian arm plays a role in your belief system. And I'm grappling with that myself to think, okay, I believe in individual liberties and freedom and all of this. Am I libertarian maybe? Is there maybe something that I'm missing about libertarianism that isn't just everyone gets what to do what they want? Is it very lawless or something?
Well, when I say I'm libertarian, I mean small L libertarian, like not the party, because a party it's going to devolve into like human desires and what they want and what they, we always mess everything up. But small L libertarian, like I don't want to tell you what to do, and I don't want you to tell me what to do. Like
Right.
I want to respect each other. I don't want to harm each other. We have to have some civility and laws and stuff like that. But yeah, I don't want to be told what to do. I don't want to tell people what to do. And I know people who are definitely more authoritarian, who they're like, no, put them in jail, throw them in jail, get rid of them. And it's like, I don't know. Don't you want to know the facts before you just, you know?
I think most political discourse, unfortunately, has devolved into being right rather than, or winning the argument rather than, truth seeking in any way. So this is kind of a segue into the next thing. I really appreciate kind of your research process. And, you came up with very, very insightful questions. So it's kind of a two-parter. I was hoping you could peel back the layers of the onion a little bit and let us know what your research process is like. And also, too, it's very impressive because, as you mentioned before, we're the first duo you intrude. I don't know how I could do this alone. Cooper and I, we have an excellent division of labor. What is it like running a show by yourself? That is a very, very impressive and I'm sure very difficult endeavor at times.
Yeah. I want to just go back 1 second to what you were just saying, Mike.
Sure.
Because debate, when people use the word debate, I try to avoid that word because I feel like that is setting people up for I'm right.
Sure.
Like, no,
Has
I need
expectations
to prove I'm right.
built in. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, let's just have a conversation. Like, let's explore ideas because debate just sets you up for I need to prove I'm right and you wrong. So, yeah, my research process is scattered, honestly. I use Obsidian as a note-taking app, and I'm
Oh,
not very
okay.
efficient with it or anything like that. But if I'm interviewing somebody, or getting ready to interview somebody, I just put their name on there, and then I'll start just writing notes down. I don't write questions down. I just write interesting things I come across and like with you guys listening to your podcast or reading your tweets, whatever it might be. It's just like little things that catch my eye, and I'll just make a note of those. And I don't have the questions prepared, but it's like, in the conversation, if I'm not remembering where I want to go next, I just look over and I'm like, okay, like I think this is interesting. Let's dive into that. So, yeah, it's not too complex of a research problem. Once I have the guess, I think the hardest part is actually finding, like researching and finding the guess, which I think you're great at.
Sure.
So,
I'm with you on that. Mike is the one that's great at that, and it's
yeah.
because he is all invested in these think tanks and foreign policy circles where he sees all these names and these authors. I've been grateful for it because like in 2025 already, I've finished 2 books and I'm halfway
Nice.
through a third.
Nice.
So it does inspire a lot of growth in that way.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's like hard. And I was actually joking with you, Artie, this week. So it feels like we have no one lined up, and then all of a sudden we have like 6 or 8 guests lined up. But
Yeah.
what episode number are you on?
I think 71 is coming out this week, maybe.
Yeah, so that's a lot. I mean, do you have a list running of how many people maybe are you waiting to reach out to? It's got to be dozens.
I have a list of like 500 people.
Oh, wow.
Not all of them I
Wow.
actually want to interview. It was just like I had an old Twitter that I got rid of, and I was following people, and I just put all those people on a list, and then went through all my bookshelf and put all the authors that are living that I could interview potentially on the list, and I have actually gotten a few people that I've read their books before, which is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
It is
definitely a
cool.
challenge when sometimes I'm looking at guests, and especially when we're doing our 9/11 era one, I start looking back, I'm like, all right, who were some of the policymakers, decision
Yeah.
makers in government at that time? And then all of a sudden I start looking, I'm like, oh, some of these folks are, some I should say, nearly all of them. I'm like, a lot of them are like 85, 90 years old. I'm like, they're well retired. They're not coming on our podcast, unfortunately. So that is truly a challenge, It's hard archiving history when it feels like it's ethereal, right? It's like slipping through our fingers. Maybe it's just because time is moving so fast, but it's 2025, but it doesn't feel it, right?
Yeah, yeah. I have interviewed somebody who's over 90 though.
Oh wow.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting. And I think another person that was like 80, George Gilder. I think he's like 86 or 87.
Trying to think who our oldest has been. I don't know that we've gotten that up there yet.
Let's not age them. I don't think they'd appreciate that.
No, it's definitely been interesting. I mean, Artie, what was one of the ones that recently you've done that maybe has a cool story? I know you were telling us about a friend that you knew from online who, or Twitter Spaces, who may be looking into some cases recently regarding the assassination of the United Healthcare guy.
Yeah, that's the interview I have coming out this Thursday or this
Oh,
week. It should be Thursday. His name is Brian O'Shea. It's the second time I interviewed him, and really cool guy. And he does some really good research. And he's like, I wanted to talk to him originally about like potential terrorist attacks and stuff like that. And he's like, hey, I've been looking into the Luigi Mangione case a bit. Can we talk about that? I'm like, yeah, that can be like the main thing we talk about. Send me your information. I'll read it. So he did like a 4 hour, I guess, podcast, like just a video live stream where he was talking about it. And then he wrote an article or several articles. And there's just some stuff that just doesn't make sense to me. Didn't make sense to him. And yeah, I'd be happy to dive into that if you guys wanted to talk about it.
Yeah, give
yeah.
us.
So
Don't give away the
wait,
whole episode, but definitely
Yeah.
give us a sneak peek. What's going on?
I don't.
Yeah.
I think this one is cut and dry. I'm surprised to hear you say that, right? Because there was like three other instances where I would say, "Oh, there's definitely questions of this cyber truck in Las Vegas," and
Yeah.
there was another one where they plowed into a festival. But this one is like the guy was there, he pulled the trigger. What's curious about that?
Well, how do we know he was there?
If this is
Fully
true,
covered,
right?
right?
Yeah, so I guess we have an image that slightly matches him. This is again, I haven't deeply dived into this. I think wasn't he found with a weapon on him as well as a fake ID that matched somebody who had checked into a hostel nearby? Is that
Allegedly,
right?
Yeah. So, and I'm not saying he's innocent because I have no idea. Maybe everything ends up checking out, but we know police can be corrupted. We
Right.
know prosecutors can get like they want to take somebody down. Like once
Sure.
something like this high profile, it's a stain on the DA to like leave it open for a while, like to not have any suspects or anything like that.
I see.
Well,
Yeah, yeah.
the initial bolo, the Crime Stoppers photos that went out. I noticed this whenever they first came out. I think December or whatever, and there's two different people. Like it's not one person. There's a Starbucks photo where the alleged shooter was in Starbucks right before the shooting. It looks like that is the shooter. It's the guy wearing the cream or a light colored backpack, and he's got the green jacket on and stuff like that. But then what they did is they took another photo from, it was from the hostel that Luigi Mangione stayed in. And they have this picture of him. He's wearing a mask. There's a mask worn in all these pictures. And then another one where his mask is off, actually. Those look like Luigi Mangione, but if you look at that next to the other image, it's like the facial structure doesn't match, and you don't see the eyebrows in the Starbucks photo. So it looks like it might, I mean, it's hard to tell for sure, but it looks like it's just questionable whether it's him. They claim that there's people saying it was a one-man job, one-man operation. And this is something that Brian has cast a lot of doubt on. He says there's almost a 0% chance that he was working alone, the shooter, because how do you, like, you have to do, Brian called it path of life or something like that, where you have to kind of stalk the person, get a feel for what their habits are, where they're going to be, where they're going. And supposedly Luigi Mangione leaves his hostel, gets to where he's going to shoot Brian Thompson a few minutes before he shoots him, has time to stop at a Starbucks, even though he looks different in that picture. But he has time to stop at a Starbucks before shooting him and doing it in a very proficient way for somebody who doesn't have the training, which is weird. And you can see things in the video of like brake lights going on in a van right before he pulls the trigger, which is like Brian saying, like, if I were running an operation like that, he didn't run assassination missions or anything like that. But he's like, if I wanted to identify a person, like, hey, this is the guy, it's like, hold the brakes on a car. Like, it makes sense. So it seems unlikely that he was working alone, the shooter. And then, yeah, supposedly he got caught with all this stuff 300 miles from where everything happened.
That is weird too.
Yeah.
Back to what he looks like. I hate looking at facial structures because I'm not good at it, and of
Yeah.
course, photos and security cameras specifically. But
Yeah.
I will say that the jacket that he committed the crime in was like a bomber jacket with nothing on the front.
Yeah.
And the photo of him with the mask off, where he's at the hostel, he's got chest pockets on the
Yeah,
jacket.
it's a completely different jacket.
So he either got all dressed up in the hood and the mask to then change his jacket, or I mean, listen, I posted on X that very day to say, yeah, if I was going to go assassinate somebody, I'd probably bring a change of clothes,
Yeah,
guys. You know, maybe I'd change my clothes, but maybe not to something almost identical.
It feels like a little bit sophisticated now that you're starting to talk about it, for him to, a young disaffected youth to be able to, enact a high profile assassination like this. It does seem very questionable.
Well, and this kid is smart. He's a very intelligent person, and you're telling me the only way that I can believe he's 300 miles away with a backpack that has everything they need to pin this crime on him, like the biggest crime that's happened in the last few weeks, like the most publicly publicized crime that's happened in the last few weeks. The only way I could believe he would just have that is if he's living kind of like a nomadic lifestyle at the time where he's just taking everything with him. But it's like, no, he just had these 4 items. His ID, the fake ID, this gun that he made, his manifesto, and I don't know. It's a little too tightly wrapped.
Sure.
Right
I could
now.
see that. Someone who's so smart to do all these things, why would you be walking around with all that evidence of the crime on him, right?
Yeah,
But
well,
also, if you're gonna try to get caught and say, "Hey, here's my manifesto, right? This is my inspiration, or whatever," then I believe he pleaded not guilty, which is then again like another question, which is why?
yeah.
I don't
Well,
know what
and-
he accomplishes.
And you look at the scenario right now, and it's very much like he's being prosecuted in the media. Like everyone is talking about him as if he is definitely the shooter, even though we haven't really seen the evidence. Somebody has released the supposed manifesto, but we really don't know the background of this. Like we don't know everything that's going on, so it is something to watch out for. Like, do we want to be a country that convicts people before we've seen them be put on trial? I know we do this every once in a while, but it's not the smartest thing in the world.
We shouldn't convict in the court of public opinion,
Yeah.
right? Like that's what
Yeah.
the court of justice is for. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting case, and we'll see what happens. Who knows? Maybe by the time it releases on Thursday, convincing evidence is out there, and it's like, no, he's definitely the guy, and maybe it's irrelevant. I've been thinking about that. Like, oh, what if something happened over the coming days? And
Well, I look
that
forward to
episode-
the deep dive episode. Either way,
Yeah.
it sounds pretty interesting. I want to hear from Brian O'Shea for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, ours is
that's
coming out
coming.
Wednesday, so we'll put a link to your channel. But the other thing that was interesting is he didn't only get charged with the assassination; he was charged with terroristic threats or terrorism. And my wife was asking me like, why? And so I looked into that, and why wouldn't a school shooter or just a random, whomever get charged with something similar? And the answer is pretty telling. I mean, this guy went out and had in his manifesto and with all of this other media coverage, right? And the firestorm was, we need to do this to the CEOs, right? So it was almost like a call to action for others, which is, I get it. That would make sense. Whereas I think if you go and do a school shooting, you probably are looking up to other school shooters. I don't know that you're going there and saying everyone else needs to go do this now. It was kind of, but I guess, hey, you don't really determine that. It's the court of public opinion that determines what the aftermath would be. And it was, though. I mean, hey, I've personally in my life now met like 4 or 5 people who were like unflinchedly, I love that guy Luigi. Look at what he did. This is amazing. Good for him. And
Which is funny because those guys are also presuming him guilty.
right.
True.
Well, right.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
a martyr in a sense, but like it's just very strange. It's just not a way to get things done. And those are the same people though that will tell you how violent January 6th was, right?
Yeah.
And what a terrible display that was. So
Yeah.
just doesn't add up in my opinion. But then you have the examples of, and I'm curious if you've heard about this, Artie, the Cybertruck in Las Vegas that blew up.
Yeah.
And did you catch what Sean Ryan,
Yeah, I
the
watched
Green
that.
Beret podcaster, put out? That's another very unsubstantiated thing, but pretty cool. because I think they confirmed the email at least was real to the gentleman who whistle blew it, where it says, hey, my name's Matt Berg. It's like 3 days before this bombing. He doesn't mention that there's going to be it, but he says, I know what these drones over New Jersey are that we've heard about so much. They're anti-gravitational, right? Shout out Ashton Forbes for learning that technology for us. And now I'm escaping. I've rented a car, and if I don't make it, something's happened to me. And what do you know? 2 days later. But the weird thing in my mind is, one, he was an explosives tech, but he built like the lowest possible possible tech explosive. So it was like gas cans. That was it.
Yeah.
He purposely was a fan of Tesla and Cybertruck. He was flaunting the car to, I think, his ex-girlfriend or his ex-wife or something like that over text. So he kind of was aware that this wasn't going to be this big explosion. I think if it was, and then the last thing was he had a gunshot wound where he was probably taken out prior to the explosion. And what do you know? You have this self-driving car that could land itself anywhere with a potential body in it to frame somebody. So everything I said, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I watched the Sean Ryan episode. I
did too.
It doesn't seem like the guy wanted to kill anybody. Like if you know how to create explosives, then when you create an explosion that is like very not bad, like it's not a bad explosion.
Contained.
Yeah, it was very
it's
tame
very
by
contained.
the comparison of what he could have really done with someone with that level of experience.
Yeah, like if you have that knowledge and you really want to do damage, you can do what the Oklahoma City bomber did. You're going to try to make a lot of damage. It's not hard either. Like I think I could do that if I wanted, and I don't have that kind of training,
Right, to make a big problem.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've been seeing more and more of that, and hopefully we don't. But we'll go back to discourse. That's what helps us get out of those ruts. So you said you listened to Sean Ryan. I know that we've talked a lot about different Joe Rogan episodes and guests and like that. And both of us now have interviewed, or all of us have interviewed, over 100 different people of interest. Where do you get your media, Artie? Are you that kind of guy that's just constantly listening to the podcasts? Do you read a lot? What's your diet?
It's hard. I'm actually in the process of I'm like trying to streamline all of this right now. So I'm setting up RSS feeds to kind of centralize my information flow. But yeah, I will read some corporate media. I always take everything with a grain of salt, of course. I don't trust anything completely. I will use the site Media Bias Fact Checker to see like where the bias is for certain things. So I do try to find some unbiased sources, but I also use X a lot. I will see what people are saying on X. I really like the real-time information that you can get there. Basically, anytime something is happening, or something is happening fairly real time, news is getting reported right now, I'm going on X to see what people are saying and to see what's happening, because there's always going to be several hours or more delay for any kind of corporate media to really get to the story. But it's kind of funny because a lot of people in podcasting and, we consider ourselves the new media, which I do think we are, but there's a lot of it that like the backbone of some of it is actually corporate media still. So.
Oh yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Well,
They realize how profitable these could be. And yeah, a lot of these, you think are homegrown small podcasts, and they have a great following, but they're owned by larger agencies. Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw something on X which was mocking Elon lately, who's saying we are the media now, and it was about the forest fires in LA, where it was basically the Oklahoma City Fire Department tweeted out at 9 a.m. "We've got 50 trucks heading to the scene of the fire, like we are coming to help." And it was not until 11 a.m. some random X user tweets out, "Breaking, I've got an inside source. Oklahoma Fire Department is telling me 50 trucks are heading south." And that is the one that gets 4 million views. Oklahoma Fire Department has 30 followers and no views. And it's like, it's almost what you're saying though, right? How is somebody going to study in our position? The only way you can go and study the January 6th, what happened and all that, is through the corporate media. So it is unavoidable, but I guess that goes down to reading the different fact checks and the biases and all of this. And actually, before this is interesting. Before starting this podcast, one of my goals was to do like a fake news kind of thing. Like, hey, I read this article for you, so you don't have to. Here's what it was about. But here is the sentence that's from this article that I found for you that basically is the disclaimer for the whole
Yeah.
thing. This has been uncited sources, and we're not really sure, but the thing's coming out, and we're going to tell you later when we have them. And
Yeah.
so it
Yeah.
was like, but you can find that in every single article, both
Yeah.
sides. You can find that in our podcast when we're freaking recording it right now. Everybody's disclaiming it, and it's like,
The caveats are the killers.
I will say
so
this. I do, no matter what it is, like, let's say the article is about a bill or something, I'm usually trying to get to the source information.
yeah,
So if a bill's
Get to the
being discussed, I
primary,
want to
yeah.
use that. I want to go to the bill and not just whatever the article is saying. If there's a video concern, like, I want to see the video. I don't want to read what you have to say about the video. I want to see the video and make my mind up for myself.
absolutely.
So have you been paying attention, and you don't have to know much about the H-1B visas, we don't have to get into the technical details, but have you seen the drama surrounding it? And what I feel is, I guess the right is kind of eating itself a little bit, because now there's two camps, those who are for and against them. Have you been following that at all?
A little bit. I think like it's Vivek and Elon that are kind of at odds in this. I think it's. I don't know much about it. I know there's like a little bit. I think the. I think if you're left leaning, you might look at that and see them as eating themselves. And then if you're right, you might be like, well, this is just healthy debate. Like, this is just, we don't agree on everything. And I actually like that, feeling more center. When I look at that, I want to see infighting in whatever group is in power or trying to get power. Like, I don't want them to have like a completely united front, because I think that's kind of scary, actually. If
Yeah,
they
it's kind
just
of funny,
align
right?
on
Like, as
everything.
a maverick, right, as they call them, there's usually that politician in the party who votes a little differently or on certain
Yeah,
issues
yeah.
and things like that. But hopefully we should see that a little bit more common, right? It shouldn't just be one person, speaking out.
Yeah.
Everyone shouldn't be towing the party line.
Yeah, I'm very much against the parties in general. I think they're corporations that are basically dictating our politics, and I like it when people go against the grain. I like it when they resist the party. It's actually something I think I might have said this on one of our interviews, but I think Trump kind of broke up the power structure of the Republican Party, and I'm waiting to see somebody do that on the left. And I think it's part of the problem that the Democratic Party has is there are, I don't know if top heavy is the word, but I would say maybe top heavy. Like, they have this power structure in place that has just, Obama was supposed to break it up a little. He came in, he kind of went against that, towed the party line way more. There just hasn't been a Democrat to really get in there and break that power structure. And I think it's good to have that. I hope someone breaks the power structure that Trump created eventually, I don't think it's going to happen right away, but eventually.
So that leads into a question that we have here. So, what would the Democratic Party have to do to earn your vote back? Because you're kind of, as you said, you're a little bit more liberal, and you're more even not necessarily still, but you were a Bernie Sanders kind of voter, right?
Yeah.
And what they did, during his primary cycle turned you off. So, what would they have to do to kind of earn your trust back?
Mm, it probably, I mean, they'd have to start paying attention to the working class and not just saying that they're paying attention to the working class, because that's something that it's basically people see them as being for the middle class, but they haven't really been in a while. They're just kind of riding on the waves of being called that for so long that it's still in people's minds, but it really isn't true. Like, if you look at how Kamala did her rallies, it's billionaires and the elites performing at these rallies, and she's not going on to normal people podcasts. She's going on to elitist podcasts, and I think basically in Clinton's years, I think that's when the relationship between the Democratic Party and Hollywood started getting really close, and I think Obama did that even more. I mean, he's a producer or director now, and
Right.
I think that relationship got pretty cozy, and I don't blame them, because I think we're obsessed with celebrity in the US, and I think it's no different for politicians. And when they get in those circles, I think they feel really cool. When you're hanging out with Jay-Z, Beyonce, when you're talking to these people and befriending these people, you feel cool. And I think the problem is our politicians need to be in touch with the common man, not just rich people.
So you're not looking for a vibes campaign. You're actually looking for policy and substance,
Yeah,
something that
yeah.
actually affects the voters. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
very
what
much
do you
policy.
know?
And the policy lately, the last 12 years has just been Trump is bad. And it's like, dude, you got to give me more than that because it's just not landing anymore.
Yeah. Orange Man bad only
Yeah,
sells for so long, right?
yeah, yeah,
I like what you said, Artie, about how it's good to see the infighting, and it sounds like your answer to that question is more so you're going to vote for the individual rather than the
yeah,
party, and that's probably how all three of us feel here
yeah.
most of the way. But I do want to say about the infighting on the right, specifically about H1B, I think that it exposes the conscientious right versus the ignorant right, is what I'm going to label them in this conversation, because this whole time we've been talking about immigration and the border for years. It's been that, yeah, we don't want illegal
Hmm.
immigrants, but we
Yeah,
love immigrants and we want legal immigration. And let's revise that system. So, isn't it very telling, though, that a faction of the right, as soon as we talk about H 1B visas, you see this racist against Indian tirade and
hmm,
exposing how they found a couple visas that were actually used for 7-Eleven cashiers. It was stuff that's like, guys, this is the goal. This is what we were
yeah,
talking about. And then when you have a leader of the party, like, I mean, I'm surprised in myself that I just phrased it that way, but Elon or Vivek, they're on the same side. They both say that H-1B visas are like non-negotiable, necessary.
hmm,
You kind of have to trust these guys, right? They're the
yeah.
ones that have actually hired them. No one of these podcasters have hired H-1Bs. So I don't know. I tend to think that it's similar to medical misinformation, election misinformation. We talked about on my episode with you, Artie, about our interview with Flint Dibble, the
Hmm.
archaeologist, right? Pseudoscience and all of that kind of stuff. It has this very strong faction and appeal to people that say, quote unquote, I'm just asking questions. And it turns out that it's this almost mental contagion where the shot they pulled a blood clot out of some lady's heart, and that means that every vaccine, even the polio vaccine's bad. It just
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. And it's actually intellectual dishonesty, right? If you're going to fight against illegal immigration and now all of a sudden fight against H-1B visas, which I think, Mike, you probably know the number off the top of your head, isn't it less than 100,000?
So what
It's
I will say is that it just my whole thesis is that immigration is good. To give context to most folks,
Hmm.
some of our pre-show banter we were engaging in. We were talking about how a lot of the environmentalist movement, and this is something when we were growing up 10, 20 years ago, we were worried about overpopulation in the developed world. But it's quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
It happened in a single generation, starting with the millennials and now even Gen Z, is we're not having kids as soon or even at all. So what we're actually facing in the developed world is a depopulation crisis. We
Yeah.
look at most developed nations, it's nearly every one of them, be it in Europe or even China, is they're experiencing these demographic problems. And what makes the US such a robust and exceptional economy is because of our immigration. Folks want to come here and they want to participate in the experiment. And to put some numbers to it, the sustainable level to keep population where it's at as a family would have to have 2.1 kids, right? So
Hmm.
on average, people are having a little over 2 kids. In the
Yeah.
US, it's 1.6, which is not sustainable. But when you compare it to the rest of the developed world, which is at like 1.2, then you really start to see like these drastic differences.
Yeah.
So to what Cooper was pointing out, we should address illegal immigration. I see it firsthand. I'm in the recycling industry. It's loaded with lots of immigrants, and there's benefits to it and there's downsides to it. The illegal immigration. So it's something we need to address. But then people get it confused with this process that certainly needs some reform, but they just want to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say no, we don't need any immigration whatsoever. Yeah, I find it, as Cooper said, intellectually dishonest, and most folks don't want to have that tough, complicated conversation.
Well, I think the right is really good at shooting itself in its own foot. Not everyone, but there are just positions that it's not everyone, but they just take these positions to an absurd degree, and immigration is one of them. One of them. I do think illegal immigration is bad. I just it is inherently bad. Like if you don't know who's coming in, the IRS and the government knows just about everything they can about us three. We are legal citizens and they know everything about us. It doesn't make sense to have people coming into our country that have so much less known about them than they know about us, you know? So
Yeah.
we do need to tackle illegal immigration, but we're a nation built on immigration. So to be completely against immigration, it's just that lack of nuance. It's this lack of it's this black and white thinking.
Right.
Somebody reads some articles, they're not very well informed, and they're like, "I'm against immigration." It's like, no, that's not actually the issue. You only read the headline.
So something we talked about when I had the pleasure of being on your show is what we use AI for. So I would hope maybe you could bring it up and let our viewers know a little bit. I know you love to use it for art, but also very interestingly, you use
Yeah.
it also to help construct your logical arguments and kind of check yourself.
Yeah, yeah. I write all of my own stuff. Like if I'm making a post, I write all my own stuff. But I will feed it into AI, and I'll say, is my logic consistent here, or are there any flaws in what I'm saying here? And sometimes, sometimes what I write is it's just maybe I'm more emotional when I write it or something like that, and I feed it, and it's like I end up not posting it. But generally, like I can make pretty sound arguments, but there's always going to be some flaws. So I'll use AI to kind of guide my ideas a bit, and I will argue with AI too. Like if it tells me something and I don't agree, I will argue, and I've gotten some concessions actually. So it's kind of cool.
That's good.
That's funny.
I'm very polite. I use please and thank you with the AI,
Yeah, me
but
too.
I like that you say that because I hate it. I post a lot on Twitter and I get these comments and it's like, dude, you copy and pasted my post and asked somebody else to respond on a computer. It's like
Yeah.
you can just almost tell
Yeah.
at this level.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, help me win this argument.
That's right. But actually, it's reminding me now of a bit. I'm gonna butcher it, but it's one of my favorite comedians, Ronnie Chang, from his latest stand-up special. And he shows his mom, or his mom shows him a picture of like something clearly AI generated. You know, it's like the Trump Tower's all on fire or whatever. And she goes, "Is this real? Look at this." And he goes, "No, it's not real." She goes, "But how do you know?" You know, and he goes, then this tirade, it's like 3 minutes of, because I grew up in the internet era and I go through the minutia of this and I can tell, and you don't even need to look at it for more than a second because you could just understand it. And it's like, it's true. It's very dangerous for 40% of the country that
Yeah.
doesn't know anything about AI. They're going to buy all of this. They're going to think people online are the smartest people on earth.
Yeah.
And then the half of us are going to go, oh, we know what you just did.
Yeah.
You don't know what the hell you're talking about.
I'd leverage the power of MLMs, AI, whatever you want to call them, all the time. And I had an interesting experience probably about 2 months ago, 3 months ago. I was just posting something in a Discord promoting our show, and I put the episode up, and I wrote a little bit of a primer about it just in case anyone wanted to, have a little intro before clicking on the link. And I actually got accused of using ChatGPT to write the thing. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how to take that as a compliment or not, because I wrote this entirely myself. But then I also wonder, I'm like, does the general society not even know the difference between like a well articulated statement and it must be written by AI, because a person couldn't possibly be this intelligent or just be coherent or not. So where do you draw the line, right? At what point is AI maybe helpful, and then where does it become too problematic?
Well, to touch on that, I think one of the Republicans tried to call Vivek Ramaswamy like ChatGPT in one of the debates or something as an insult. So it's kind of funny. It reminds me of that. But
You're right. I remember that. I'm going to remember what that was by the end of your talking.
I think the problem is when you're letting the AI do your thinking for you. Like you don't want, like what's sitting on top of your shoulders is, if you believe in God, it's the best gift God ever gave to you. And if you don't believe in God, it is just a remarkable piece of nature. It is, it's just amazing, the brains that we have and what we're capable of. And we are very different than the other animals in that sense. But I think if you are letting AI do your thinking completely for you, I think that's the problem. I think if you're using it as a tool, that's great, but you don't want to substitute it for your own thinking.
Make it better. Make it simpler.
Yeah.
That's
So,
basically.
so maybe we'll peel back the layers a little bit here too, so so folks know about the inner cogs of making a podcast. And you've probably seen this as you promote your show on different channels. Have you ever seen these advertisements that are essentially like, AI will do your entire show for you? Like
Yeah.
it'll create show notes, and it's just like at a certain point, it's like, Yeah, you're right. This is like the dead internet theory. I don't know if you've ever heard that, where all
Mm.
of these AIs are making fake comments on people's pages, driving fake engagement, writing the whole show for them because they determine that this is viral content. Like I
Yeah.
feel you on that. Where people are starting to let the AI do the thinking for them.
Yeah, it's useful. Like I have it right my show notes or whatever, my description for the podcast, because it's useful because it's easier for it to digest it to our episode and put out a description than it is for me to be like, oh, what did we talk about? I have to watch it for 2 hours, and
Yeah.
I find it useful for that. But yeah, like I mean, we know. I'm sure you guys use a little AI for your podcast too.
For
It
sure.
A
can't
lot.
do everything. It cannot do everything.
Oh,
Not
absolutely.
even close. Like there's so much that you still need to do. I I'll see commercials for Opus clips, which I do use Opus, and it's like, oh, this is how people post 1,000 posts a month or something, whatever it is. It's like I use it. It still takes me some time to get the
Oh
post
yeah.
right because like it'll take me an hour to get 10 posts created because I care about how they end up. It's not perfect. Some of them are horrible, and it's like, why did you make this cut? Why did you cut it off mid sentence? Like, it's
Yeah.
not perfect. It's just a tool.
For people listening, Opus is what we all use to go take our hour-long video and turn it into the vertical clips for social media on TikTok and Instagram. And it is very helpful because it's hard to identify the smartest or coolest or most emotional parts of your episode, and this does it for you. But Artie, actually, the other day I was on TikTok and I saw a video. It was this guy Caleb Hammer who does the financial audit. I don't know if anyone knows him, but it wasn't his channel that posted the video, and it was just a clip clearly made from Opus. It had the basic like font and everything, and in the description it was speaker one speaks to speaker two and speaker three. It's like, oh my god, they didn't even read it before hitting the post button.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
like, come on, guys. But it's just a testament, right? To we have these tools. I mean, you're the one man show, right? Me and Mike at least try to split it up as best we can. Do you find that you ever like burn out on this stuff on social media?
yeah.
Do you want to just throw your phone at the wall? Because right now, and I'll say this, I don't know if our podcast listeners know this, but I've only posted like 3 tweets, 5 tweets this year so far. I'm definitely burnt out. It did not give me what I wanted in 2024, and so I'm reevaluating.
Yeah.
The other platforms have helped me, and so that's what I've decided. And I'm wondering if you seen that, felt that. Is it burnout? Is it just in my head? Is it my content? But like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, yeah, I've been burnt out. Starting in December, I was like, I'm just kind of done right now. And
So
I
it's
stopped doing my
systemic.
spaces. Actually, I think the space I did with you, Cooper, is the last one that I did. And then I started getting back into spaces this week, and it's just like, it's an off the record, no recording, just how are you guys doing? Part of the community thing, where it's just a conversation because it's a lot of effort to like put things together, advertise for it, promote it. But yeah, I get really burnt out. I have help though. I hired an intern to help me with posting on Instagram, uh, and I have an editor that helps me with that. So that helps a bit, and I want to release a little bit more control of that over time. Obviously, money is always a factor with that, but I feel like that helps. My ex, I'll always control my ex account, and I'll always be the one interviewing on my podcast. But yeah, I don't mind releasing some of that because I don't like social media. I actually did a roundtable with some other podcasters yesterday, and it's what I said yesterday. If I could, I would just do the podcast and basically never post on social media.
Right.
But
So
you
it's really
can't.
for you more about building the connections, having
Yeah,
those intriguing conversations, growing your own thoughts and brain instead of getting famous and getting a paycheck. In fact,
yeah,
when you start to make that the goal, that's when you kind of peter out. I feel like
yeah,
it's not possible. So,
yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
I think podcasting has been a very humbling but also very important experience. It's taught me a lot. It's also helped me build a lot of skills. I think one of the most important things, and it just applies generally to life, is you realize you have so many hours in the day,
Yeah,
and you have to focus on those things that you can feasibly get done. And that's actually one of Cooper's strengths, is he's able to kind of pull me back, because I often have these kind of
mm,
grandiose ideas. I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to get this and this, and he goes, Mike, there's not enough hours in the week or even day for us to get any of this stuff done. We need you to
yeah.
just, like, let's just do these handful of things. What are some of the things, I guess you could say, you just realize it's not worth the time investment? I know for us is we're looking at certain social media channels, and it's just, you realize, like, all this time and posting, it's very little return.
Yeah.
Or flip it on its head. What is your biggest success, right? Like for
Yeah.
us, for example, where I say X is not performing, TikTok overperforming. We get hundreds of views on every video. It drives a lot to our YouTube. I mean, and our YouTube is where it's built for videos, so it really takes off. And
Yeah.
I'm like, what are you finding? What are you dropping and what are you picking up in 25? I guess.
Yeah. I dropped everything fairly early. So like Facebook and LinkedIn, I post on there to let people know that I released an episode, but I don't do anything else. I don't post any of the
Right.
clips or anything like that. So I think that's what I learned at first. I was posting clips everywhere at first, and then and I had a bad experience with TikTok, honestly, but I think I'm back on there now, and I I kind of just got to this point where I'm putting all of this energy to post on all of these platforms, and I'm only really getting engagement. I really only talk to people on X and Instagram and maybe one other platform. Like, I'm just gonna drop all of that stuff. I'll do the announcement because that takes, you know, a minute each week, 2 minutes
Sure.
each week. But after that, there's just no point in putting any time to it. So I'd say that just like Facebook. I think Facebook is pretty much a dead platform at this point. Um, it's
So you
kind of
don't think
sad.
Mark Zuckerberg, all of a sudden being one of the pros and not censoring anything more, is going to bring the platform back?
The only people I know that post on Facebook are the no offense, it's the parents, the people
Sure.
with kids my age,
Yeah.
and then it's grandparents. Like it's the older
You,
generation.
you're not wrong. The demographics are certainly older. That's something that we discovered too. Is you'd have to target an older demographic, because that's
Yeah,
pretty much who's there.
yeah,
Which we do. We read a lot of history books, but no, it's good. I mean, and every platform has its very own voice, which has been interesting as well. And you kind of get into your niche. But
yeah.
all right, well, we're a politics show, and we say that we do culture and intrigue. Just so our listeners, if they're interested in yours, what would you say yours? Is it political in nature, or more just about intrigue? I think is how I would describe it.
Yeah, I say society and culture. I mean, it's been a lot of politics the last couple months with the election coming up and
Of
getting
course.
over. So, yeah, I like politics, and I just don't want my show to be just politics because I would go crazy. But I like politics, and well, I hate politics and I like it. I like talking about it. Like, as long as it's a civil conversation, I enjoy it. As long as it's not like the partisan, like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong, Republican. I got into a conversation the other night where somebody was just saying, oh, Republicans are horrible and they want to destroy everything and get rid of the FDA. And I'm like, he was originally saying like scientists or nutritionists. And I'm like, well, what have they done? Because the FDA has done a lot. Like, there's a lot of things that they're failing on and they have failed on. And I pointed that out, and he just wanted to stick on like, well, Republicans are bad. I'm like, okay, this isn't my kind of conversation. I'm out. So
Yeah, just they want to rehash talking points that they
yeah,
learned somewhere else, and then once they've used them, they don't really have much to continue the conversation with at that point.
yeah, yeah.
Flint Dibble tweeted out last week, the archaeologist who got canceled by the pseudo archaeologist. He said, "Yeah, it's true. I was diagnosed by cancer, and I beat it. And you know how I beat it? Mainstream medicine."
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Just
like, okay, you got us there,
yeah,
man.
That's
clickbait.
funny.
It's the
So,
place for dunking.
so what have you got in the works? We know you got the Luigi Mangione deep dive episode. Is there anything else that you're working on coming up in the pipeline?
Yeah, I interviewed my friend Ryan, who I just met on X. He grew up in an Amish Mennonite cult for a while, which was really interesting. So we had a conversation. It was cool. Um, Other than that, I have a couple interviews booked, but it's it's the beginning of the year, and I feel kind of I've been in this mode for a few weeks now, and it's going to last a few more, where I'm just like trying to redo all my systems and get everything in place. And I'm the type of personality where once because I can leave things unorganized for a while, but once I start organizing, it's like, okay, I don't need to just organize my information flow for news. I need to organize my pictures. I need to organize everything. Like my computer needs to be completely straight. So it's a process, but yeah, I'm looking forward to. I'm putting my potential guest list together, like making it better, adding a bunch of people that I haven't been adding. So yeah, I don't have like anything like, oh yeah, everything in place right now, but I'm excited for where things are gonna go because I'm just once I have everything organized, I feel like I'll be able to come up with a better plan going forward. You know?
Yeah, systemize, right? It makes the
Yeah.
labor not feel like the work. If you
Yeah.
have a list
Yeah.
of who you're going to talk to and about what, then all you have to do is show up. You don't have to think about all of that. And
Yeah.
that's what we've been doing as well, actually, at this exact point. And it's funny when we chat just offline. A lot of what you do and what we do is very similar. And
Yeah.
it's funny, this is kind of like a meta episode about how we run our shows, but a lot of our audience actually is podcasters as well, in that's how we network. And I think your show is similar as well.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. And it's cool. This is how we have to network. You know,
Yeah.
this is it's part of the grind. But the point was, we all are feeling the same kind of thing all the time, and it's kind of cool. It's we talked to George Hayworth, the masculinity coach, and he's going to cringe at that label, but you know, he's a man's man for sure, and he helps other guys become really responsible in that way.
Yeah.
And just the level of discipline and all of that, it makes me think like, whoa, what are we doing? But
It reminds me of a story that you told me a while ago, and I forget who was the influencer that you pointed it on, but he had brought up that story where, you know, you get that the reality check, and you're like, okay, we're grinding away, you know, and we're not feeling like we're making that much progress, and then you talk to somebody who's a little bit ahead of where you are, and then you're like, oh, so like, you know, they ask you how many posts you do a day, and you're like, oh, we do like, you know, 1 or 2 posts, and they're like, oh, I do 10 to 20, and you're like, oh, okay, that's why they're doing that much more successful. They're doing 10 to 20 times the amount of work that we're doing. That explains it. It's certainly a challenge, but it inspires you. So in that same vein, you doing what you do definitely inspires us, and we're very grateful for you having hosted us. And let's not let this be the last time. I look forward to other, you know, invitations on each other's show. I definitely you know, appreciate that kind of opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. I love what you guys are doing. I have a lot of respect for both of you. It was awesome talking to both of you separately and then in this episode. It's been really cool.
Where can we find you? Let the folks know where what's the best channels and links to find you at.
Yeah, so X, Artie podcast, and then Thoughtfully Mindless on Spotify, Apple, all kinds of stuff like that. And if you ever don't know where to find me, everything can be found on thoughtfullymindless.com. I have basically everything listed there. You can even listen to the podcast there. So everything is on
awesome.
that site, and yeah, it's pretty much the best way to find me.
Awesome, Artie. Well, hey, all of the links are below, you guys. And this has been Elevated Thoughts.